There is a silence born not of peace, but of censorship. A silence imposed, stifled among pages torn from ancient tomes, erased accounts from dusty archives and ruins that murmur what must no longer be spoken. In the heart of the Castilian hills of Spain lies the skeleton of the Monastery of San Pedro de Arlanza, a monument to faith, to devotion, and to deliberate oblivion. For centuries, this millennia-old building hosted sacred rites, but also events that should never have seen the light of day. Monks driven insane by invisible voices, pilgrims who never returned, and subterranean chambers stumbled upon by chance, bearing inscriptions that not even Inquisition scholars dared fully translate. By the 19th century, its abandonment seemed natural, but the records tell a different story. Something was found there, something that prompted the Church's silent, irrevocable response. Why was a monastery that once epitomized medieval piety progressively erased from the official history? What secrets did it conceal that the Vatican itself discreetly silenced? This video, you will delve into a tale of faith, corrupted ancient secrets and voices that still echo beneath Arlanza's cold stones. Stay until the end, for the final revelation is no mere legend. It is a somber reminder that some sacred sites rest upon foundations darker than we dare imagine. Hidden among mist-clad hills and woods where sunlight hesitates to enter, the monastery of San Pedro de Arlanza lies like an architectural corpse, its stone bones laid bare to time. Founded in 912 by order of Count Fernán González, the monastery was erected as a symbol of the Christian reconquest and unyielding faith. But some say its original intentions were far from purely spiritual. The isolated site, on the banks of the Arlanza River, was chosen according to ancient writings, not merely for its beauty, but because it sat upon a confluence of telluric lines, crossroads of forces that, according to old beliefs, facilitated communication with the world of the dead. The first monks purportedly received instructions not only from Rome, but from far more obscure sources, preserved in apocryphal manuscripts that never reached the public eye. Even today, few dare walk among the ruins at dusk. During the Middle Ages, San Pedro de Arlanza prospered. Its library housed volumes found nowhere else in the region, and its renown drew the faithful, scholars, and the tormented. Rumor held that unorthodox healing rites took place there, midnight penance sessions were conducted, and even rites blending Christian liturgy with fragments of pre-Christian doctrines, especially those dedicated to the cult of the dead. They say the monastery's bells tolled of their own accord on stormy nights. However, it was in the late 16th century that the first accounts of madness emerged. Monks abandoning their cells and wandering naked through the cloisters, murmuring words in forgotten tongues. Witnesses spoke of shadows that moved on their own, and a persistent odor of fresh blood appearing from nowhere. The Inquisition paid visits, but the records of their inspections were sealed with the papal seal, as if the Vatican itself had decided this must vanish beneath the weight of silence. Over the ensuing centuries, the monastery fell to ruin. In 1835, with Spain's ecclesiastical confiscations, the monks were officially expelled and the buildings left to decay. Yet some say that was merely the official excuse. The true reason for abandonment lay in something uncovered beneath the high altar during partial restoration, a sealed crypt containing human bones arranged in a ritual formation and a mangled Latin inscription that, when translated, read, "Let the flesh consume, but may the whisper remain." From that moment on, the place was shunned. Attempts to convert the ruins into a tourist attraction failed under mysterious circumstances. Workers fell suddenly ill, equipment ceased to function, and specters appeared on security cameras, leading to the abandonment of any restoration projects. Even historical records began to vanish. Modern encyclopedias scarcely mention the phenomena or the site's original significance. The monastery, in short, was silenced. Yet it remains unmoving and vigilant, awaiting those still brave enough to hear what should never have been uttered. Those who ventured into the monastery of San Pedro de Arlanza after its desertion report the same sensation, as though the stones themselves had learned to listen. The silence within is absolute but not peaceful. It weighs on the shoulders, vibrates through the bones, and seems to whisper at frequencies that defy reason. Witnesses say the very air carries a density that oppresses the chest, as if the corridors were saturated with ancient echoes imprisoned between walls for centuries. In the center of the cloister, where a herb garden once flourished, now only twisted, withered vegetation grows. The breeze that drifts through seems to murmur incomprehensible words, fragments of prayers, or perhaps the laments of monks who never left. A scholar from Salamanca, who visited in the 1970s, recorded in his diary hearing a Gregorian chant at nightfall, though he was entirely alone. Approaching the old chapel, he found the door ajar. Upon entering, darkness enveloped him abruptly and he collapsed unconscious. His journal ends abruptly there. His body was never found. Other visitors, even the most skeptical, recount unnerving experiences. Voices mimicking the tone of friends, yet with no lip movement. Figures dragging themselves along the floor as though bereft of legs. And above all, a profound sense of being watched by invisible presences. Presences that do not wish to be seen, only remembered. Villagers in the nearby hamlet of Hortiguela avoid speaking of the monastery. The eldest, when pressed, tell hushed. Tales of monks driven mad after hearing the voice of the abyss within the old sacristy. One, according to legend, gouged out his own eyes after a night of forced meditation, claiming to have seen the true face of the Most High, and it was not light. These stories, dismissed by some as exaggeration or folklore, are passed down in whispers, with near religious reverence for the terror they carry. A recurring detail in these accounts is the existence of a secret passage beneath the library, now completely collapsed. Its entrance was supposedly sealed by the monks themselves before they left, using melted lead and cement, a peculiar measure suggesting a desire to keep something locked away. Some speculate this subterranean chamber served as a penance cell. More daring theories speak of a profane reliquary, where heretical artifacts were stored, protected by blood oaths and magical seals drawn from medieval grimoires. In 2003, a group of Spanish urban explorers, lanterns and cameras in hand, decided to film a nocturnal excursion to the monastery. The footage was never released. A tape later recovered by a relative of one of the missing youths shows glimpses of a hooded figure moving among the columns, ragged breathing, and the unmistakable sound of prayers chanted in reverse Latin. One final frame shows a member of the team staring blankly into the lens, eyes wide, blood streaming from his ears, as though his mind had been pierced by something unbearable. Following that incident, access became unofficially forbidden. Local forest rangers warn visitors, and handmade hazard zone signs appear along the approach paths. Strangely, there is no official decree closing the area. It is as if oblivion itself serves as the greatest barrier. Yet occult scholars continue their investigations. One expert in medieval liturgy identified certain wall inscriptions, previously thought decorative, as a sequence of invocations tied to heretical Gnostic tradition, notably the cult of Abraxas, an ambivalent entity embodying both light and darkness. This would explain the monks' spiritual conflict, trapped between church dogma and forbidden revelations manifesting in meditation and disturbing dreams. A phrase recurs at various points throughout the structure. In silencio veritas devorate. Animum, in silence truth devours the soul. According to some theologians, this perverse inversion of the Christian concept of divine revelation means that here, silence is not God's voice, but the empty space where the sacred has been corrupted. The cloister, once a place of contemplation, became a spiritual prison, and the voices that now echo there do not plead for release, they demand witnesses. Among the many mysteries of the monastery of San Pedro de Arlanza, few are as unsettling as the fragments of accounts suggesting a secret rite, a ceremony of obscure origin, repeated in cycles over the centuries, always outside the church's sight under the guise of deep prayer. Whispered in legends as obsequium mutus or the silent obedience, it appears in no official liturgical manual. It was said to be handed down orally among select monks who vowed not only to silence themselves, but to forget. According to the oldest accounts, the rite took place on winter solstice nights. Participating monks fasted for 33 days, confined within the chamber beneath the library known as the Serpent's Crypt. There, before an inverted cross carved in black marble, they mouthed chants without uttering a sound, marking their bodies with archaic symbols, akin to those in alchemical grimoires and forbidden 13th century manuscripts. The ritual's purpose was never publicly declared, but letters in cipher suggested aimed to achieve infernal autonosis, enlightenment through direct communion with pre-Christian entities, regarded as intermediaries between the divine and the profane. Evidence indicates these practices were exposed at least once by a papal envoy in the late 17th century. The investigating inquisitor reported witnessing men with eyes turned inward, blood-stained smiles and tongues voluntarily removed, signifying their renunciation of speech, since according to obsequium mutus doctrine, human words were too impure to describe what lurked in the shadows of the sacred. The rite also involved what scholars call the sixth bell. Unlike the 5 main monastery bells, this one was smaller, unmarked and forged from an unidentified metal. Monks denied its existence, yet several accounts claim that on certain dawns its sharp metallic peal rang across the valley, even when the principal bells lay silent. Local legend holds that only those marked by something unseen could hear that toll. One of the darkest episodes linked to obsequium mutus occurred in 1789. A young novice, Lorenzo Gavilan, secretly kept a diary describing his preparation for the rite. In it he wrote of dreams in which a faceless monk led him to a pitch-black chamber, where voices instructed him in a tongue he grasped intuitively despite never having studied it. He recorded a sequence of numbers and symbols later found inscribed at the base of the high altar, visible only after lightning struck the stone in 1902, stripping away its surface. Lorenzo's diary ends with a chilling warning. "If I do not return, burn this book, and by God do not follow the bell's sound." The novice's body was never recovered, and contemporaneous monks logged his disappearance as spiritual desertion. Contemporary researchers believe this ritual influenced later European occult currents. Elements of obsequium mutus appear in texts of the Black Rose Cross, anonymous 18th century Bavarian treatises, and even in Aleister Crowley's letters, where he alludes to a Spanish monastery where silence is wielded as an inverted ascension. A document salvaged from the secret archives of the Burgos Archdiocese is a letter from Abbot Dom Inocencio de Leon to the Vatican in 1803. In a tone edged with desperation, he wrote, "That which we have awakened desires not worship, but continuation. The Church must choose between truth and oblivion. I beg for all that is holy, choose oblivion." That letter seems to have sealed the monastery's fate. Within 30 years it was officially decommissioned, abandoned, and all records of its activities sealed. The Vatican has never publicly acknowledged San Pedro de Arlanza. Yet symbology experts note its original coat of arms, St. Peter and his keys, has gradually been replaced in recent decades by ambiguous, almost hermetic engravings, suggesting a campaign to erase its traditional iconography and render the place invisible. Today, the remnants of the altar where the rite was held remain, draped in moss and concealed by climbing vines. Unwitting tourists photograph it without knowing, but they say that if you stand in absolute silence before it long enough, a high-pitched tone, a bell that no longer exists, will begin to resonate inside your skull. And then, perhaps you will be ready to hear what was whispered in the darkness. His name was Andrés Molina, a solitary, meticulous Spanish archivist in middle age, known for his silent dedication and for poring over documents that few cared to read. Employed at a theological library affiliated with the University of Salamanca, specializing in medieval texts, his fascination with forgotten monasteries and extinct orders inevitably drew him to San Pedro de Arlanza, a name almost absent from official records, as though voluntarily expunged from history. The first clue came in an encrypted letter unearthed within a collection of 17th century Benedictine correspondence. It spoke of a silence spreading like leprosy and referenced a black stone that sings penance to men. The blend of mysticism and ciphered language captivated Andrés, who spent weeks decoding the fragments. What he discovered was disturbing. References to Obsequium Mutus, the sixth bell, and an inner sect calling itself Ordinem Veritatis Absconditae, the Order of Hidden Truth. Intrigued, Andrés traveled to Burgos on the pretext of academic research. In Hortiguela, no one would speak, yet a blind-eyed old woman casually advised, "If you go there, take a mirror. They cannot bear the reflection." Her words unsettled him, but did not deter him. The next morning, he set out on foot along the trails to the monastery. During his exploration, he uncovered what seemed to be an entrance partially buried beneath the library's rubble. Digging by hand, he gained access to a subterranean chamber. Enveloped in darkness and ancient mold, he found a ceiling etched with descending spiral symbols, all pointing to a black stone altar. Above it hung an inverted, corroded cross, as if it had been burnt from within. On the ground lay a metallic object, the sixth bell. Cold to the touch, it vibrated faintly, as if receptive to an inaudible frequency. Andrés made no notes at the time. He simply stood there, transfixed. Rumor has it he remained motionless for hours until nosebleeds triggered a collapse. A group of scouts discovered him days later, delirious and uttering disjointed phrases in archaic Latin. After that episode, Andrés retreated into seclusion. Colleagues said he communicated with someone, or something, through murmurs only he could hear. One night he was seen circling the university cemetery, repeating, "He showed me he is within time." A few days later, he was found dead in his study, all the mirrors in his home shrouded under dark cloths. Yet before he died, he left a sealed box with instructions to open it only 10 years after his death. When the time came in 2024, its contents were revealed. Detailed notes on the ritual, photographs of the crypt that could not be digitally reproduced, for they corrupted any file, and most unsettlingly, a letter addressed to the Vatican. The letter declared, among other things, "You imprisoned it in silence, but it keeps speaking. Hidden truth will not be buried. It demands to be heard. And now I have heard it. There is no forgetting." Alongside the letter was a cassette tape of a flat, emotionless voice chanting in ritualistic cadence. Experts who analyzed it detected an infrasonic frequency beneath the voice that affected the nervous system. 3 researchers fell ill when they listened. 1 suffered seizures. Since then, the Vatican has intensified its oversight of records relating to defunct monastic orders and resealed all Arlanza documents under the classification Index Prohibitorum Occulte. But as Andres foresaw, the truth had already slipped out. It persists in letters, in ruins, in fractured memories, and perhaps in you, now that you know part of what was meant to remain buried. Ruins tell stories. Some of faith and redemption, others of pride and downfall. Yet there are those that do not speak, they only whisper, and only to those bold enough to listen. The monastery of San Pedro de Arlanza is one such forgotten voice, not erased by the passage of time, but by a deliberate force that strove to obliterate every trace of what transpired there. The church silenced the site, not for lack of fear, but because there was too much to fear. Throughout this journey, we traversed corridors where the air still vibrates with ancient lamentations. We discovered obsequium mutus, a ritual where silence is not devotion, but a means to contact that which must not be named. We saw how monks relinquished their words and souls to become vessels of the ineffable, and how that knowledge corrupted not only bodies, but the very structure of time within. Those walls, the tragedy of Andres Molina, reminds us that some questions once answered destroy more than they illuminate, and the most unsettling truth is realizing that beyond the mist cloaking Burgos's hills, this monastery still stands, waiting, like a fossilized heart that on certain nights begins to beat again, a place that no longer seeks the faithful, but witnesses. Perhaps this is the true terror, not what cries out in the dark, but what remains silent. Because silence is the one sound that carries all the screams that could not be heard. If you enjoyed this descent into the occult's abyss, like the video, share it and subscribe for more stories that challenge the veil of reality. Until our next journey into history's shadows.